Okay, we better get started.
Okay.
I'm going to get in trouble.
I'm hitting the go live button. We are live.
I am, yes, recording.
Tell your friends you're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
We have another very special episode. We have the 1978 movie Gray Lady Down. Nathan, do you have a history with this movie at all?
Oh, I love submarine movies, and I watched this one a few times when I was a kid.
Oh, really? Okay, you knew about this? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's kind of interesting, but it's weird. Like, we're doing this movie in like 1978 after coming off Close Encounters, and it's like, oh yeah, they still made movies like this. This is.
Yeah, well, like when I was grabbing the list of these 70s movies, I just went to the Wikipedia page for the year the movies came out, and then like the first list of movies is just like the top 10 box office movies. So that was where I was grabbing a lot of these movies from. This one I kind of went deeper, and like I picked this one because I saw it had a ridiculous cast of like, oh, I recognize almost all these people. It's like,
Yes.
I've never heard of this movie. Let's do it.
Yeah, this was kind of like it's another one of those. This was at the tail end of the disaster flicks.
Yeah.
So, but this was sort of different because it didn't have a lot of the melodrama in it. But yeah, this one was. It's one of those movies where it's like, well, this is either from the 50s, 60s, or 70s. Like except for the it was more modern technology in some ways, but it wasn't one of those movies that really stuck out. And it's like, oh yeah, this is a transitional movie of like we're going into a new style of filmmaking. It's like, oh no, they were making movies like this 20 and 30 years ago. But I mean, at the time this movie was made,
yeah,
years before.
Well, I mean, that's kind of one of the problems of the movie is that the special effects work seem like they're from 20 years old, while like all the other stuff seems modern and it doesn't mix all that well.
Yeah, it is weird. It's weird. You're kind of like, this was almost 1980 when this came out, and it's like, huh? It's
because the first thing that came to mind was like The Final Countdown, because that's another movie. It's like, let's use the Navy to make a movie.
Yes.
But that actually came out 2 years later, so this is before that.
Yeah, this is like a submarine genre movie, but it's really hard to compare it to some of the later. Because Run Silent, Run Deep, that was before this. The Enemy Below was before this. Those are also way more character driven than this.
Yeah.
And then you have like Das Boot and stuff that came after this, and it's like, oh, this is definitely the redheaded stepchild. A lot of these movies, which is, it's like in and of itself is not bad, and there's elements of it that are interesting. But when you compare it to the other submarine movies before and immediately after, it's like, wow. These guys are going to take a beating just on the quality of what came before and immediately after.
Yeah. It came out April. This fight, all it said was it came out April 1978. No date, just it came out in April.
Yeah.
I think it had a date for the premiere, which was like in March, late March or something like that. But the wide release, no date on it. Directed by David Green, who kind of just mostly a TV guy.
Yeah, he's like a British guy who did a lot of TV stuff.
See, I don't think I recall a lot of his stuff. Cinematographer is Stephen Larner, who's got Caddyshack on his list as being a cinematographer for. One of the Twilight Zone segments. What else has he done? Oh yeah, the Beauty and the Beast TV show.
Okay.
He worked on 33 episodes of that. I can't remember. I always remember that show being like, I kind of want to go back to that show because it's like, it's Linda Hamilton and Ron Perlman.
Yep.
And like this weird like Beauty and the Beast thing that's also like a murder mystery or what was it? There's
they like solve crimes.
Yeah, because she's like a district attorney or something.
That's set in like modern New York.
Yes.
And it just kind of hung around forever as kind of its own weird thing.
Yeah.
I think the X-Files finally killed it. Like, oh, wait, this is something stranger and more engaging.
Well, back when we had like the original format of the show, like I was thinking about suggesting like doing that and also like was it Forever Night?
Okay, yeah.
which is another like just paranormal. Because I think he was a vampire, but he was like a good vampire, investigating other paranormal things in Canada or whatever. Because that was a big Canadian show. But
Yeah, yeah.
um, Summer Trevor worked on V.
Okay.
With the Winds of War. Is that a miniseries you recall?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Okay.
That was let's see, who was that? That was a novel. That was a Michener novel, I think. That yeah, there was a few people that wrote like these just
Robert. Oh, wait, I'm
really
sorry.
long. No, go ahead.
No, it was. I was. We said Michener or whatever, and I was the star was Robert Mitchum. I was like, oh wait, no, that's not the writer. That's the star. So.
No, no. James Michener wrote.
Okay.
I think he wrote The Winds of War. Could be wrong, but there was a time when people wrote 1,500-page novels.
Yeah.
That, like just had all these interconnected. I forget. There's a name for that kind of novel. They don't do it anymore. Now they break them up into different books because you make more money. But there was but The Winds of War, I think, was it was that kind of stuff.
But yeah, it seemed
That's
like
gonna drive me nuts. Let me look it up.
man, seeing this movie seemed to have a lot of like TV people working on this movie. So
Yes. Oh yeah.
yeah, I tried to look up like a lot of the production stuff. I don't. It was hard to find because it's actually done by like a independent company and released by Universal. It's got like, what was it like? Oh man, what's the name of the company? Well, it's also based on a book called Event 1000,
Yeah.
which usually Wikipedia will have stuff on everything, and like there's no entry for Event 1000. There's an entry for Grey Lady Down, but not Event 1000.
Yeah. It was probably one of those like kind of obscure books. It's like, hey, let's loosely base our screenplay on this.
Yeah, I mean, I did find it on archive.org, so I read most of it. Well, actually, I read 75 pages, and then I had to hurry up, and I just looked at the first page of a chapter, looked at a middle page, looked at the last page, and got to the rest of the book. But I read most of it because it is like it's very weird because like almost the only thing that these books in the movie have in common is that a nuclear submarine goes down the Atlantic.
Yeah.
All the methods are completely different. Yeah, what is
So Herman Wouk wrote The Winds of War.
Okay.
So I was wrong. It wasn't Michener, but it was one of those type of things, which has nothing to do with anything except the cinematographer and also just the kind of TV/movies we're talking about in the era.
But yeah, the Grey Lady Down was produced by the Mirish Corporation, which they've done some good stuff, but they seem to be like wide in quality. But like they won Oscars. They did produce like The Heat of the Night, and West Side Story and stuff like that. Yeah, the Walter Mirish, he actually like died this year at like 101 years old. So
wow.
Yeah, the novel's written by David Lavallee. Again, I haven't seen any like information on this guy either. James Whitaker and Howard Sackler did the screenplay. And then there's a weird credit where it says Frank P. Rosenberg did the adaptation, meaning he like adapted the novel into screenplay form, and then the screenplay guys changed it. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just weird licensing or something like that. Oh yeah, these writers also wrote Megaforce. I don't know if you remember that movie.
Why does that sound familiar?
It's basically they tried to make G.I. Joe.
Okay.
It's got Barry Bostwick in it. The like kind of like was he the mayor in what's that show with had Charlie Sheen in it, and he replaced Michael J. Fox.
Oh, Spin City?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember that. Yeah, that's one of those. I got one of those the riff tracks for that. It's a great riff track movie because it's a ridiculous movie, but they do have like they finagled some like army or whatever to let them use all their cool toys in their movie. So there is like this kind of like
This amazing production value with this real stilted dialogue,
yeah.
terrible camera work, and all
Yeah,
that.
we basically
Okay.
we gotta get all this cool camera work of like these like doing military exercises, and then they're gonna mesh that in with the movie we shot off to the side.
Yeah, that's I do. I think I've seen that.
It's not good. It's just kind of it's become more infamous as like every kind of various riff track or mystery science theater thing that exists now has done their version of it. Of course, cast is Charlton Heston, David Carradine, and Stacy Keach, and a bunch of other people that you'll recognize. We'll get to them. So, yeah.
Because I remember there was some famous movie, or not a good movie, but it's some military movie where they like finagled the army into letting them do stuff, and it was in 1985, and it had Humvees in it.
Huh.
And Abrams tanks, and people were like, what are these futuristic vehicles that they made for this movie? And it's like, oh no, those are real, you're paying for them. Because I remember like when the Abrams tank came out, people were like, it looks like it's, because it's still to this day, it still looks like the most modern tank.
Yeah.
And then you realize it's like, oh, that's like as old as me. It was designed in the late 60s. It's like, oh, okay. But it still looks like it's like that's the baddest tank on the battlefield. It's futuristic.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways it is.
Yeah.
Because they know exactly what its strengths and weaknesses are at this point. They've definitely doped that out.
It's been battle tested.
And I think the most battle tested tank in history, I believe, in terms of length of service, maybe not numbers.
Oh, okay.
Because I think the Sherman tank was used by the Israelis through the 70s, but they just upgunned it to some ridiculous level. But yeah, it was still basically a Sherman tank. And there were some, and the Egyptians used Panzers that they bought as surplus.
Huh.
But it was weird. Like in one, I think it was, I don't know which one it was. If it was Yom Kippur or one of them. But like, yeah, it was Shermans versus Panzers again. Like 30 years later. Of course, the Israelis just wiped the field with them because I think they just, I don't know. There's something about the Egyptians when it comes to like actual fighting. They're like driving a straight line towards the enemy, and the enemy's like, "Oh, start firing! they're going to keep coming."
Well, also, I think didn't the Israeli have a way better air force, and that's kind of like what swung a lot of things for those.
Oh yeah, and they also had like satellite surveillance, and all the intelligence they could handle, and not theirs, ours, but it's like Israelis, like they're the most powerful small country in the world. They can fight like nobody else. It's like, yeah, when the United States like gives them all the everything, it's like, yeah, they don't have to pay to build that infrastructure. It's like we did.
So Act 1, we got.
Yeah, let's not even talk about that. Forget about all
that. No, let's more talk about how awesome the Israeli army is.
Yeah,
against underfunded people.
Mopping the floor with them. It's like, well, I hope so. Guys are popping out of holes with AK-47s. They've been soaking in motor oil for 10 years against the 21st century army. It's like, well.
So with Act 1, we got some.
Can you believe 40,000 people are dead? It's like, I can't believe it's only 40,000 people at this point. You ever see what an artillery shell does to a densely packed city? Yeah. Well, there goes the last of our listeners.
So we have Act 1. We got wind and water whooshing over some just blackness. Then we got a title scroll. It's like, we desire to express grateful appreciation to the Department of Defense and the United States Navy for the cooperation which has extended on the production of this picture. We especially salute the officers and the men of the USS Cayuga and the USS Pigeon, whose ships many of the sequences were filmed. So we just got the bootlicking out front here.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a mandate by the Navy or if that was just a film production wanting to be grateful. It's like, oh man, they saved us millions of dollars in production.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, because it's at different times in history. Like the military has always been happy to work with studio companies, but sometimes they're like, we want to read the script, and then that's like that'll usually. But sometimes they're real generous, like, yeah, go for it. And then sometimes they're like, no, we want nothing to do with this movie.
Yeah.
But it's never like there's not a hard set of rules. I
No.
mean, if you're gonna make something completely like anti-military and anti-war, then no, don't look for a lot of help from them. But sometimes they can weave things in there where it's like, huh, that seems kind of that's an interesting idea. Let's let that roll. Or sometimes it happens. Usually it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean they're hoping that just serves as a recruitment film if the film turns out the way they want to.
Yeah, isn't that what like the original Top Gun was like the most successful recruitment tool ever?
Yeah,
or something? They're like, yeah, go ahead, take one of our aircraft carriers, do whatever you want.
I think the last film I remember they got that kind of cooperation was it? Oh no, Behind Enemy Lines. Like they basically,
I could see that. Yeah.
Where they basically they wrote a script and they basically let the military rewrite it to the way they wanted to, and they just had some fake Eastern European country be at war, and everything was accidental, and they got to shoot on an aircraft carrier for free, and basically made an $80 million movie for about $20 million.
Oh yeah, it was amazing.
They made a straight to video franchise out of it, so it worked out for somebody.
Yeah, somebody got paid. Interestingly enough, what was the one? Crimson Tide, not any support from the military. I was actually surprised. So that's the kind of stuff they won't do.
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is too far.
You can't make the officers look bad or the.
Well, the cool thing about that is no one was really bad. It was just somebody was ultimately wrong, that they were two very intelligent, willful people that were not going to budge.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, there was no bad guy in that movie, but there was definitely like, well, we definitely want somebody to come out ahead here because the other guy's going to kill millions of people. And wouldn't be wrong for doing it because those were his orders, but it's like, it's good it didn't happen.
And the military is like, we don't like the scenario. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Then we get a fade in. It's a sunrise at sea, I'm guessing. I don't know. Maybe it's sunset. I don't know. We zoom in on the water with credits playing over it. Then we cut to the obvious submarine model underwater.
Yes.
Which I don't. It really took them till Hunt for Red October to figure out how to film submarines. Although I heard some trivia said they did it the way they did in Hunt for October, where it's just a room filled with smoke, and they drove a model around. But I think they have a model in a tank here. I don't know. Maybe they have different types here, but I'm pretty sure they got it in a tank.
Yeah, this looks like a tank because the water bubble. What's the one thing someone told me? Like the water bubbles are very disproportionate when they do that.
Yeah.
Because an actual submarine is under the ocean is just this huge mechanical device that's moving along actually scary fast. It's not fast compared to a car, but it's crazy fast considering you can't see anything.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for sound to bounce back at you to know you're not crashing into a rock. And sometimes with the smartest people in the world in them, you still crashing into rocks. So yeah, but the bubbles are always disproportionate.
Well, the thing I always think of the way when they're just filming a model in a tank is the way they have that water shine on it, because it's like, well, we got to light up the model. It's like, well, that defeats the purpose of a ship underwater where it's basically no light is getting to.
Yeah, you know what a realistic submarine movie would be like? When we're shooting outside the submarine, just a black screen with sound.
Yeah.
And not very much, because if you make too much, then they can find you.
Yeah, because sound travels real well through the water.
Also, I think I heard another thing on the Hunt for Red October was they made the Russian submarines. The guy who one of the guys when they did the Klingon ships for the Star Trek the Motion Picture, it's like, how can we differentiate between the submarines? It's like, We'll make the American submarines look like starships, like in Star Trek, and make the Russian submarines look all red and dark like Klingon ships. That way the people won't be confused as to what ship you're in. Is like, oh, besides the fact that everyone has a Russian accent, but they were worried, like, what if they can't tell the ships apart? It's like, because nobody knew what the inside of either of those things really looked like. So they're just like guessing, like, yeah, just make it look like a Klingon battle cruiser, because that's what we think of the Russians anyways.
Although there's some like bad things with the submarine model here, where it's like you can clearly see the string. Although there is a way you could get away with that, because submarines do have like towed sonar arrays and sonar buoys, and like, yeah, the string's just a sonar buoy.
Yeah.
Like, but here it's just a string holding the model. So and also, I guess is the same exact model from Ice Station Zebra, so which is like a 10-year-old movie. So it's like, saving money all over the place here.
Well, Ice Station Zebra was a very expensive movie for its time.
Then we have Captain Paul Blanchard, who I'm gonna forget his name constantly because so I kept being like, Captain what's his name? Blanchard.
Captain Heston.
Yeah, played by Charlton Heston. He's plotting a course, which he's got like the cool, like so I was like in school, I had like both. I took a normal drafting class and a CAD drafting class, and you got these cool little rulers that would like hold at certain degrees, so you could draw like, various things you need to draft or whatever. So I love those things for drawing. Those things still exist, but here it's got the complicated like compound arm to set a course and things like that. This would also just all be like a computer screen, I'm guessing, nowadays or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And they're given a course and setting, and I only vaguely understand what's going on there. I've never actually like went down. I was like, what does this mean when they're saying this? Because it's like head course 315, which I don't know. It's like, but then there's a speed. It's like, all right, I understand that. And then there's an up and down bubble. It's like, okay, I can kind of understand that. You're going up or down in the space. But the heading, I have no idea. I don't even know if I'm guessing that's on like a 360-degree track, and you're just picking that direction or that degree, and then I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how underwater navigation works.
Yeah.
I actually don't know how any navigation works, but underwater navigation is like, because it's, it's full dimensional movement, but also like there is a top and a bottom too. So yeah. I don't know how they do that. You got to be a lot better at math than I ever was.
We got Stephen McCaddy here, who we love from one of our favorite movies, Pontypool.
Yeah, it was nice to see him here. Young Stephen McCaddy, looking exactly like Stephen McCaddy.
But I really thought, he's like Canadian, right? Or is that just Canadian? Okay. Because here he has to try. He's trying to. I was like, is he Dutch or something? But I guess he's trying to do like a Nashville accent or something.
Yeah, he's a country boy.
He plays Lieutenant Danny Murphy. We got Ronnie Cox, who's ultimately the bad guy in RoboCop.
Yeah,
he gets thrown out of the building at the end.
And the only other captain of the Enterprise D besides Picard, Captain Jellicoe.
He's the XO Commander David Samuelson.
I didn't realize Ronnie Cox actually does a lot more in the. He's like a musician more than an actor.
Huh.
Because he turns down a lot of acting roles to be he does like hundreds of shows a year. He used to go to Ireland and do a show, and he's like some kind of country western act, because he's from New Mexico, I think.
Huh. Okay.
He's still alive. He's 85.
Still doing it.
Yeah, I always remember him as he'll always be like Dick Jones.
Yeah.
And then what was the weird one where he had a weird name in why am I drawing a blank on that one? He had a weird name in Total Recall, because he was like the what was he, the Chancellor of Mars? What was his name there? I forget.
I don't.
Oh yeah, Velos Cohagen. because he was just working with Paul Verhoeven again.
Oh,
But
okay.
you could tell like that name was weird. It's like did they intend that for another actor? And they just like it's Ronnie Cox is available.
We worked with him last time. We'll work with him again.
He basically plays the same guy, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, Ronnie Cox is great at playing just like evil executive.
Just hard-assed guy who's like,
And he's always like, he's always doing something behind your back, but he's wearing a smile in front of you.
well, it's like when he took Picard's place is when Picard went underground to infiltrate the Kardashians, the Kardashians. He's stopped the Kardashians. Yeah, Jellicoe is just like did not like Riker at all. He's like, yeah, this free and easy style you have with the crew, this isn't working anymore. We're going from a 4-shift to a 3-shift rotation, and you know, it's Riker's like, I don't think that's a good idea. He's like, well, I'm the captain, so it's a good idea, you know. But he wasn't like a bad guy; he was just a different guy.
Yeah.
And then they wanted to go in and rescue Picard, and he was like, no, that's not the mission. We're not going in to rescue Picard. And I think he got like, I forget how that happened. I think Picard's rescued himself or something. Then at the end, Captain Jellicoe was like, nice working with y'all. And he just stepped in the transporter. Bye. You know, he was the jerk captain of the Enterprise that was there for a couple weeks.
Makes you respect Picard way more.
It's like, oh, we thought Picard had a cork up his ass. This guy.
They rig the sub to surface, so they turn on the red lights to signify they're going to surface. Which here, yeah, I don't know, yeah. There's gonna be a lot. Like I don't like I was in the Marines, so maybe I should know naval stuff. But I was never on any boat, and I never knew. So there's a lot of things here I'm gonna have no context for what they got right or wrong. So
yeah, I've read a lot of books and watched a lot of submarine movies, and that's about it. I actually love to read submarine books, and I've read almost all of them you can think of that are worth reading. But yeah, I don't. As far as what they got right or wrong, is I have no practical experience. I'm way too claustrophobic in real life to ever. They're fun to read about. Never would want to get on one. So he's like, closing that door, huh? Yep. Oh, well, it's just us in a nuclear reactor. Cool. What could go wrong?
But like sometimes red lighting is used to just kind of like to be easier on their eyes and stuff, and just like save like night vision. That there's that too.
Yeah.
But here that they're using, it's like you say you're going red, doesn't mean you're like we're going to the surface. Then we cut to an actual submarine coming out of the water. Which I guess this one here was actually like a diesel submarine or something they had just laying around.
Yeah.
There's some trivia I read about where it was a diesel submarine that was supposed to go to Iran, and then there was the
that sail fell through.
Yeah. So it's night out at the conning tower. So I'm guessing that must have been sundown at that earlier. The captain leaves the conning tower. Murphy takes charge. He gets word of a boat on the horizon, but he can't see anything because it's foggy. Then we cut to our Norwegian cargo ship loses its radar and decides to keep going. I forget what they say here. I don't know, them trying to save money or whatever, or time or something. Something about electricians in New York. They can't like trust them or something like that.
Yeah. Just anti-union. They don't like the union.
Which is different in the book. In the book, there's kind of like, in the book, it's played up as like, you know that thing where like two people are walking straight toward each other, and then they both decide they're going to get out of each other's way at the same time, and then they end up like walking in the same exact direction and getting each other's way again. That's essentially what happens in the book.
Go to starboard. No, go to port. Go to starboard. No.
And then they end up getting hit by a cargo ship, which is very real. And when you see stuff all the time, it's like, oh yeah, that's what happened. But it's also boring.
Well, remember when what was it? The U.S. submarine surfaced and like sunk a Japanese fishing boat.
Yeah.
And like killed people.
Yeah.
And then someone started a rumor that they had the cast of Jackass on the submarine, and they were filming something, and the Navy was okay. It was total bullshit.
Yeah.
But people, it was one of those early internet rumors. Like Johnny Knoxville killed a bunch of Japanese fishermen. It's like, what? That's not true. But and that the internet did exist then, but I think you couldn't really I don't think anyone was making statements about, because it was so ridiculous. It's like,
Yeah.
this can't be true. But if it was, it'd be like, that's nuts.
Oh, yeah,
They kill people all the time like that.
I mean, yeah. There's a great article where it's like even better by the internet because it has like all these time cues and stuff like that about like some U.S. ship like trying to like navigate a bunch of systems going down, and like you'd be like horrified by like, this is a modern ship, right? It's like, and people basically got to like get out their cell phones to communicate each other on a giant ship to get things going.
Oh yeah, that's one of the YouTube videos I watched. I watch very few naval YouTube videos, but the ones I found that I watched was when they like work out the anchor system, and they're just called anchor drop videos. I think I've talked about these before.
Oh, when they break?
No, well, just when they drop the
okay.
anchor, once they get it all lubed up, and it's like,
yeah.
let it go, fast drop or whatever. And it's like, oh my God. It's like, that's a good way to kill 50 people. I mean, that's insane. I've seen the anchors freewheel, but these are the Navy ones are crazy because those are like the biggest anchors.
Yeah.
I think they're on like aircraft carriers and
Yeah.
stuff. And it's like, that's nuts. You're talking about chain links as big as your car, and then moving fast.
Yeah.
No, when the ones like freewheel, like on the civilian like cargo ships, like that's insane too, but for a different reason. It's like, oh, the chain's glowing red just from friction because the whatever the pulley or the devices that slows it down just broke. It's just like, whoo, right to the bottom. Oh my God.
Murphy gets a bearing update of like there's 3,000, the ship's 3,000 yards away on radar, or no, feet, or I'm not sure what they're using. So he calls the captain to the bridge.
Meters. Don't they use meters?
Maybe, but then also like when they talk about like how far they're down under, they use feet. So it probably interchanges. Of course, that could be a movie thing too, or just the writing in the script, and then the script writer just interchanged everything for everything. So
fathoms. How many bells down are we? Just get into old naval stuff like.
Well, I remember like in the Marines, like the ACOG scopes, like they're setting, but they're all actually set to meters. They're not set to feet, and so you have to realize what range you're on or yards. So you have to make sure to like adjust things where it's like, oh, this isn't meant for the yardage. Well, the yards are actually shorter, so you're actually like kind of pulling up a bit on the aiming under or over the little line for that. And then if you're on a range with meters, then you're using like exactly the line. So
yeah. We should just probably use metric in everything except telling the temperature.
Yeah.
Because 38 degrees sounds nice. Then you realize, oh, it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit,
Yeah.
38 degrees Celsius or something like that. It's like, no.
Well, I maybe I've explained this before, but I always have like this thing about Fahrenheit is actually easier to use because we live in a climate where it's like either 0 to 100 degrees.
Yeah.
And so every 10-degree increments, you know what kind of weather it is outside. It's like, oh, if it's 0, it's freezing. If it's 100, it's fucking hot. And everything in between, it's like you can kind of like determine like what clothes you need and stuff like that. Whereas, yeah, with like Celsius, it's like everything from like, okay, you're 0 to 30. It's like, great. What does any of this mean?
It's minus 12 outside. That sounds terrible. 24 degrees. Like, oh, what? Okay. That sucks.
Yeah, I remember I had kind of a mix up like that because I was watching F1 and they're talking about the tire blankets they put on the tires. And they said, yeah, they're heated up to 100 degrees. I was like, okay, that's pretty hot. And then I realized they meant Celsius. It's like, oh, you're boiling the tires.
Yeah. You keep the tires almost the state of molten wax.
So yeah, Blanchard takes charge and he tries to avoid a collision. The Norwegian boat like sees a sub at like the last moment, so collision arms start blaring all over the place. The cargo vessel runs into the sub and like the back of it, and some of the sections start taking water, and then like steam pipes burst, or just hot water pipes burst. There's like 800 people that get like hot water in their face and the scars and burns. Like they're standing there almost like it's a horror movie, just like like dying intentionally almost.
Yeah, it looks like they got like water sprayed on them.
Yeah, I don't know like what kind of pipes these are meant to be, like steam pipes or hot water pipes. I know there's like stuff like, well, hot water when it's under pressure like that, it can be hotter than it normally would be, and then once it's exposed to normal air, then it will just evaporate and explode because
Yeah.
at normal pressure, it will become steam. So then terrible things will happen. But I don't know. They just have hot water getting old people here. So.
Yeah, high pressure steam pipes bursting in a nuclear submarine are quite. It's intense. And Russian submarines, especially of the Soviet era, used to. I told you they had the broom handles.
Yeah.
What they were painted red, and they'd stick them. You know, when they thought they knew they had a steam leak, and it was high pressure, usually returned from a nuclear reactor. It's like, we got to find that leak, but you just didn't want to walk into that corridor. And by corridor, I mean something maybe this wide. You'd want to crawl in there, so you'd put the broom handles in there. And if something sliced through it, you'd be like, okay, it's this far in, because they had measurements denoted on it. Okay, it's that far in, where we'd actually have like a sensor or something. But they wouldn't do that. So yeah, but you didn't want to get your arm cut off by jet of superheated steam the size of a toothpick coming out like thousands of pounds per square inch.
Because I've dealt with hot water stuff before, but steam is its own nightmare and problems. And I'm not sure of the context what it's doing here. I'm not sure if this is connected to the reactor or not, or anything like that. Because there's no problem in this entire movie about radiation. That's never a problem in this entire movie. So.
No, because that's what you had to say at that time. It's like, it's perfectly safe. Nothing can go wrong. But actually, it is. We've lost a few of these, and the whole ocean isn't filled with radiation, so it does work. But
well, also the ocean's pretty good at getting rid of radiation. So
yeah, they use water on the ISS to protect the people in there so they don't get fried. Because he just goes. There's certain times that they have to go be behind the water storage cistern in the ISS, otherwise they would all get cancer very quickly.
Well, also like that
was it the protection up there?
Was it the N1, that experimental sub that the Navy built to go really deep, and it's like the smallest nuclear reactor sub.
Mm-hmm.
And like if they had to do work behind a certain bulkhead, like they had to like turn down the reactor to work on it because there's like no shielding back there, but it's like they just use the water to shield themselves from radiation.
Yep.
The
water has strong atomic bonds. You can't really. It's good at deflecting radiation. Not as good as lead, but almost.
But I mean, that's that's the weird thing. The difference between the book and this. In the book, they're down there for like a month because the reactor's still working. So it's like, okay, we got we got infinite power. We can, as long as the CO2 scrubber's working, we got air for our entire lives, and then. It's a much more like dire situation in the book because it's just how long they have to spend down there. Whereas here, it's like, the reactor's offline and they're just running off of battery power. And then I don't know the time period. It seems like they have like a day to make this happen, but I actually don't know how long. What time?
I think they said at some point 90 hours.
Okay. Because they're flying a lot of stuff in that seems like it would take more than the time they have. But.
Yeah, we're going from San Diego to the middle of the Atlantic. Like, what are you hauling the Snark with? An SR-71? Like, how are you getting there that fast?
Let's see. The sub starts sinking. They have to secure a door, even though there's like men still in the compartment. Although they don't really play it up, they don't show like one guy, the last guy coming up like, no, let me in. It's just like the door's empty when they close it.
Yeah, they kind of wait, but the captain's like, you got to close it.
Yeah.
Rodney Cox is like, there's men out there. And he's like, we have to save this section.
Yeah.
This is the control room.
The engine room's flooding, so they don't have propulsion. There's a radio guy that's trying to get a message out. This is the USS Neptune, and the books it's called like the Lancerfish. Yeah, like all the names are different. Like they don't bring any of the character names over or anything like that. So.
No.
They blow all the ballast to try to like level the ship, but there's one sailor that's scared that they're reaching crush depth, which I think they say it's 1,200, and then they end up at like 1,500 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Let's see. The sub bounces off the ocean floor and then eventually comes to a stop and says they're at 1,450 feet. There's a bunch of people that are injured and, that they have to take care of. Blanchard makes an announcement to the crew about the situation, saying that the ship must have reported the accident, so like they're going to be looking for us, and they're just going to have to wait for a rescue. Like he seems pretty calm about it. It's like, yeah, they'll get it.
And they're basically resting on an undersea cliff.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like a mile down if they roll off that cliff.
Yeah, they're basically on the edge of the Atlantic, like abyss or whatever, or whatever. Then we get Samuelson comes down the ladder and he's like angry and bleeding. So I don't remember like what happened to him.
Yeah, he probably bashed his head on something.
And then he just says, "Congratulations, Skipper." Which I guess the whole thing here is like, well, this one thing I heard was wrong with it is that like, so like, Blanchard's going. This is like his last command of this ship, and then he's going off to handle like a sub fleet or whatever. And then I guess they don't allow this, but the XO is supposed to take over this ship, which I guess you don't do that in the Navy. You just bring on a new captain to this ship. But so he's basically angry that like, well, you just fucked this ship, and like now I'm not gonna get a command because you blew up the ship.
Which is the first thing a guy would be worried about. Strapped to a nuclear reactor. It's like, damn it, I'm never going to get to command this ship. Might not get to be able to live much longer, but okay.
I guess you got to try to create some drama here. They can't just.
Well, yeah, that's the problem with this movie is like there's a lot of these disaster movies, and I'm guessing because a lot, you know, like things like Airport and Poseidon, like those are all civilians or, you know, people like that. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of melodrama. It's really not believable that guys smart enough to be in command of like nuclear submarines, or there's going to be a massive amount of drama. That's why like things like Crimson Tide are cool. It's like, oh, I could see these guys getting dramatic about this, but not, you know, maybe if a disaster happens, they might like, well, let's think our way through this because it'll be the last thing we do if we don't. So.
I remember, yeah, there's a bit more dramatic thing in the book is that like when they start going down, there's a guy in the conning tower and he just like closes the hatch and his leg is stuck on something and he just gets pulled under and drowned with the sub.
Oh God!
So they didn't include that here. So that being in Act 1 because we got a sub on the floor and we got to get it out. So we have Act 2, we got Supreme Allied Commander Atlantic or Command.
Subcomland.
Yeah, they have great weird names for all this stuff.
Oh yeah,
it sounds weird at first, but then you realize it's like 5 different acronyms crammed together. It's like, okay, yeah.
Well, it's like when they talk about like NATO ground forces, and like the leader of that is called SACEUR. It's like, what's that? Is that French? No, it means Supreme Allied Commander Europe. Like, oh, you're just mashing words together.
We're in like some naval computer room. A message come through. They get word of like, here they're not sure. They're just like, they just know there's Neptune was in the area and something bad happened. So they're like, all right, we got something on the floor here. Then some lady gets a call in bed and hands the phone off to Admiral Michael Barnes. This is Charles Siofi, which we last saw in Clute.
Yep.
He's like the ultimate evil guy in that movie. Was not expecting to see him here. And then Michael calls Captain Bennett, or that's Stacy Keach here. And here he gives the titular line, "Gray Lady down," meaning that there's a nuclear submarine has sunk.
Not as cool as Broken Arrow, but still kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what in the book it's called Event 1000 because it's like as an exercise it's called Exercise 1000, that's what they call it when they're planning to rescue a sub off the floor, and then when it actually happens, it becomes Event 1000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which doesn't explain anything, but I guess it's just ominous and it's like, well, what are all the other events? How did you get through 999 events and then nuclear submarines are exactly 1,000? But
Yeah.
And again, I don't even know if that's true. That could have been something they just made up for the book. I'm not sure.
A broken arrow is real. That was a
Yeah.
real term. There's also another one called Fated Giant when a nuclear bomb is triggered but fails to go off. You have to recover those too because you don't steal the material. It's like, how much has that happened? Ever happened?
Has to happen to have a name, right? It's like,
Yeah. Well, no, I have books and books and books that are just about nothing but like weird thought experiments that they actually like wrote up papers on. What would happen if this happened and if that happened? And yeah, that's where I got that from. This is all these weird scenarios because they have to run through everything.
Yeah. So yeah, Bennett shoots up out of bed because now he's got to work on this. Cut to the ocean floor with the Neptune. Captain Blanchard gets a roster of the reported dead. There's like 52 people died in the engine room and mechanical room. I'm not sure if they ever say the mechanical room. I think they just say the engine room. In the book, it's the engine room and the mechanical room.
Okay.
So Blanchard starts going through the boat to see things firsthand. They have a sailor. I think. Oh, what's his name? That's like I think it's Page. And so he's like acting as the medic, even though I guess he isn't. And I guess they've lost all the doctors and medics or something in the engine room.
Yeah, he's like, I'm the best thing you got.
Which basically is like, I can do bandage wrapping and stitches, but like, and then he'll try to handle medicine stuff. Like, this guy actually does like a great job considering they say he's not trained at this. So.
Yeah, he seems to be very knowledgeable. And he's like asking the captain, like, I gotta do painkillers now, but I need your permission for that. Captain will be like, you got any Vikes? Throw a few my way. I gotta get my stress level down.
The chief of the boat gives some updates on their CO2 scrubber, saying that they're down and that they only have like a day and a half of fresh air. And then the captain just blazingly says, we won't be here down here that long. Which I guess I actually don't know how long they've been down there. Also, he's got a beard, which I'm not sure that's allowed.
That's I've actually seen that before, but I don't know what the thinking is behind it or when it's allowed. I think it's very senior people do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, both Gates and Blanchard have a beard, but like nobody else does.
Yeah.
Then we come back to we have Captain Bennett and Admiral Barnes are like working the numbers, and they're like on the edge of what they can do to rescue the sailors, which that's a big thing in the boat. Like the big thing in the boat is they're trying to get a diving bell down there, but it's basically just outside its range.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't go down that far. And they have like some weird plan where like they rig it up where it's like 100 feet underneath the water, and then they send the bell down to get it, and then like they'd have to pull everybody up to 100 feet, and then they'd have to like free dive from the diving bell outside to the surface. But then they don't do that. That's just an idea that they have. Which that would have been way more exciting. Imagine getting rescued from a boat. It's like, now you got to free dive to the surface.
Yeah. You got to do that weird breathing so your eardrums don't explode.
So yeah,
if you want to read a dark account of this really happening, read Time to Die, which is about the Russian one that went down in the early 2000s.
Oh, Kursk.
Yeah, this kind of something screwed up happened, and but these guys all died because they couldn't get rescue equipment down there.
Yeah.
I mean, we could, but the Russians didn't want us to steal their antique submarine secrets, so they wouldn't let us. Like, we already have blueprints to this fucking thing. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess around this time, because the book came out in 71, this comes out 78, and then so there already been some accidents. There's the Thresher and the Scorpion.
Yeah.
Which I guess the Scorpion one's actually weirdly similar to the Kursk. I think it was like a torpedo exploded inside or something like that.
Yeah, there was something to it.
The Thresher just went down because they had like just like bad seals that iced over or something like that.
Yeah, there was. I remember it was something like that. Yeah, it was something a lot simpler than what you think.
um, and then so yeah, I think the only rescue of somebody like using the diving bell was like some like a it was like a sub. I think it was an English sub went down, but it went down in like I don't know, like 300 feet of water. So or no, that'd be more than that. But it wasn't like almost all these accidents. The sub ends up in a place where it's like, yeah, we can't get rescue anything from down there, and the subs imploded as they sank. So, so this is just on the edge of the sub imploding where it sinks here. Because like it sinks like basically next to the Atlantic shelf where it's like a near vertical. They're like in a near vertical crevice canyon thing, and then like they're just on the edge of falling off into an even deeper one. um, and also here they mentioned gravity slides, which are like an underwater water slide, where it's like, I'm guessing where the water comes to the edge of something, it'll just slide down like that, and then also pull debris with it or something. I don't know. I didn't necessarily understand that. So. And it's not a thing in the book, so I don't but eventually it'll push the boat and it'll put debris on it. So,
Yeah, it's. I tried to look those up, and it's a geologic term, and it has to do with the weight of the ocean and the rotation of the Earth and how it affects different levels of compacted soil and
okay.
rocks, and it's like really complicated. But yeah, it's basically gravity is the force that acts on it.
Yeah.
And it's just and water is extremely dense and heavy, and the rotation of the earth and how it's affected by it and how water moves. And yeah, it's like really complex. Like, oh well, whatever. This is a bad thing. Bad, bad, bad.
So Barton sends Bennett on a plane to go to a ship that they have over the area. There's also a DSRV that they're talking about. They're going to fly it in. In the book, that's like a brand new thing. Here, it's still like kind of a brand new thing, but it's like in service. Whereas in the book, it's just like it's still in experimental phases. um, Bennett calls his wife to tell Blanchard's wife the situation. So yeah, we'll have like 2 scenes with women, and then they'll be gone from the movie.
No, gotta get the dames in here.
Then we cut to they load up the DSRV like on a truck in San Diego, and we cut back to the Neptune. There's no radio contact. The scrubber isn't working. The hatches are sweating, or at least the captain thinks they are, and he's kind of worried about it.
Yeah, that hatch becomes like an ominous portent throughout the rest of the movie. It's like the wetter that hatch gets, and they say there's thousands of tons of pressure behind that hatch.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, and it's just like right there on the bridge too, so it's just like always something you can glance at. Just like how bad are things going on? Blanchard meets with Paige. Paige thinks one of the guys gonna die, and then he's like, "Hey, what should I do when he dies? Should we move him?" He's like, "Just cover him up." So and then we catch Murphy is playing the flute, and here's where we learn that he's like from Nashville, and I guess it was odd for him to learn the flute. It's also he's afraid of dying because he's like, my parents are really proud of me, and like the captain's like, I'm sure they are. Like we're all gonna die the same, dudes. Then we get Cobb tells Blanchard that the ship is tight, so he went around checking all the doors. So he's like, yeah, they're good. But he found they gave Samuelson like this gift whistle. And he finds it's been discarded and thrown away. So he's like, Samuelson's being a little bitch. I guess I got to talk to him. And then we cut to Liz goes to Blanchard's wife. And then Blanchard's wife just figures out by looks that like, I can't remember. She says like, he's down, isn't he? And then they're gone from the movie. It doesn't matter anymore. So, then we cut to they load the DSRV into a cargo plane, which this is all real stuff here. So getting their values worth here, just filming a exercise. Which But yeah, I hear that this DSRV, like the newer ones, where it's like basically like an assault vehicle for the Navy SEALs. Those ones look really neat and are basically just like smaller versions of nuclear submarines. But here it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like, it's a bit hobbled together almost, but
Yeah.
it's also not painted black. So you can see all you can see all the different like sections of it that's it's bolted together and stuff. So it just looks a bit more unseemly, I guess, here.
Yeah, I mean I forget. There's a cool book called The Terrible Hours. It's about the USS Squalus.
Huh.
It was in 39. They were doing tests off the coast, the Atlantic coast somewhere, and it sunk. And at like 26, it was in a U.S. It was a U.S. Submarine, and they had there's a guy named Swede Mumpson. He was like a captain, and the Navy was like, yeah, once they go down like that, we can't get the people out or whatever. And they had something called the McCann Rescue Chamber, which kind of looks like a DSRV, but it's like a bullet because it goes down like this.
Yeah.
And this diver went on there and rescued those guys, and they were able to bring the ship back up, and they recommissioned it, gave it a different name. Usually, once a bunch of people die, they rename it. But yeah, so it was like, yeah, the DSRVs. It's like, oh yeah, the concept's been around since the 20s. But yeah, it's a cool book called The Terrible Hours. It talks all about
Yeah, that's the diving bell thing they try to use in the book.
yeah.
I'm not sure if it's called a diving. It might be, they call it a bell because it's not necessarily like a self-powered ship. It's a thing that's like lowered down, and you have to be guided.
Yeah, it's like
by
a crane operated. It's
Yeah.
not like internal power. Yeah, that's what they used in The Terrible Hours.
Yeah.
It's just something designed to mate up to the hatch, and you can get men in and out in the same atmosphere. Which is like, there's also some wild stuff that goes on there too. That's like, okay, this is interesting.
I saw some weird ship contraption thing where it's meant for like a lot like shores and stuff like that. But basically the ship will like lower this little bell like down, and it'll pump out all the water, and then like a person just walk down there and pick up stuff off the sea floor. I don't know what they're using for. I don't know if they're like getting gold with it or what the hell they're doing with it, but it's like, just put a person on the seafloor and everything's fine. It's like, what are you doing that for? Seems like a weird thing to do. It must have a general some purpose that pays for itself that I can't think of.
Yeah, I don't know. The oceans are weird places full of weird things. I had this thing I put on Facebook the other day. It was like the inside of a diving bell, and it was a glass. There was like a window, and it had all the horrible things they've ever found in the deep ocean. Because everything's just a nightmare down there. And it was like, if you're cold, they're cold. Let the horrors. It's like, everything in that picture, that's all real. That's not made up. That's stuff they found where they're like, what the hell?
Samuelson. Then we cut to Samuelson meets with the captain. He claims that like they didn't need to surface, but Blanchard wanted to like put on a show for his last thing, which I guess is probably true. I don't know. Then a gravity slides happens, and then like it shakes the boat. Harris, the radio guy, has a breakdown. It's like, I'm talking, like no one will answer me. I know they can hear me.
Can we put this on some kind of repeat feature where I don't have to say this every 5 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's literally what he's doing. They just have shifts of guys just repeating the signal out there until somebody answers.
Red squirrel to gray squirrel. Red squirrel to gray squirrel.
The doors are getting sweaty after the gravity slide. The new radio guy hears a garbled message. They get a clear connection with NASA, and so like they celebrate because like, hey, we got contact. We're gonna get saved. Bennett lands on some Navy boat that's in the area. Bennett talks with Blanchard on the radio. Says they're on battery backup at 90%. They have 36 hours of air left, and 41 men are accounted for with some casualties. Meaning that some of those men that's still alive are not good. Which I was confused. Is casualties both like death and like out of action, or is that just meant for people that are alive and out of action?
I always assume that like you did total casualties, which are people incapable of continuing to fight, and then you break it down as wounded and dead after
Okay,
that.
okay,
But a casualty means it's like effectively removed from your force.
okay.
I think that's how I understood it.
The crew is excited the DSRV is on the way, although they don't realize it's being like flown in. So it's like, it's just above us. It's like, no, it isn't. Then we cut to the Neptune crew is watching Jaws on the boat. The audio goes out, and then the crew just starts like talking over it and like adding their own dialogue, which is kind of
Which
a
was
fun
fun.
moment. Yeah.
It's like, hey, it's Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Then there's another gravity slide. There's a call to shut all the watertight doors, which I feel like shouldn't you be doing that anyways? But actually, I don't know, there's probably a big problem with air going on here, so they'd probably have them move. Because that's a big problem. The book they don't really deal with here is like the CO2 scrubbers in the book eventually go out, so they just got to, and they got to like basically assume there's like pockets of CO2 at places, and like you won't know until you just start passing out.
Yeah.
Let's see here. The sub gets covered with debris, and now they need to be, now they need to find out how much debris is on there. So they just kind of bang a wrench against it and guess.
Yeah. If I'm past the crush depth of this thing, and it could go at any moment, I don't think smacking on it with a hammer would be a good idea. I don't know.
Oh, I just got hit with a bunch of rocks. I suppose it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
I was like, I mean, how can you really determine that? Because I don't know. He's like, you got to determine it manually. It's like, are they going to open the hatch? Like, what the hell are they going to do? It's like, no, just banging a wrench and be like, oh,
Get out there and look. Hold your breath.
Put somebody in a torpedo tube and put him out there.
Fire. What happened? Is he out there? No, he exploded when he was violently ejected from the torpedo tube. It was like, oh, damn it.
So Blanchard reports that the hatch is covered. Samuelson sulks some more because that's what he does. That's what he's gonna do. And we cut to a helicopter land somewhere. There's a meeting of like admirals and like they're debriefing on the situation. Here's like just some suit, which I'm guessing he's like some government guy, and all he's worried about is there a nuclear accident. And they're like, no, that's all good.
Yeah, no, they're at the Pentagon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the Undersecretary of the Navy.
Okay. But here's where they start talking about the Snark, which is a different experimental ship that has like an arm and a camera on it. So they're going to use it to like clear the debris from the rescue hatch. And then we cut to Captain Gates, which is played by David Carradine, is running along on the beach, and he gets chased down by Mickey, which is Ned Beatty in a yellow Jeep, which this is just it's great how weird he is. It's like, really, it kind of adds a new flavor to the movie.
Oh yeah, this is the best part of the movie.
Like he's running weird. He does everything weird in this movie.
Yeah, he's like not present. He's kind of autistic. He's running with one arm up in the air. He's really not paying attention to his guy until he says there's a submarine down. Then he runs to the Jeep, gets in, which means he could hear him the whole time but was ignoring him.
Yeah. Gates ignores him until he says like they want to use the Snark, and he's like, oh, because apparently he built this thing. I don't even know if the Snark is a real thing or something they made up. I don't know.
The Snark is a fictitious creature that Lewis Carroll made up in his kind of like, you ever heard the term snipe hunt?
Yeah.
Well, snark hunt is kind of the same thing. It's a fictitious creature that no one can find, but everyone's hunting for.
Well, I also know snark is like the concept of being like, you know, you're snarky, which means you're like, what, you're like condescending or what
sarcastic.
Yeah, sarcastic.
So
I didn't know if that was also like a kind of a point to his character that he's kind of sarcastic. He's snarky.
Yeah.
That could be.
Definitely riding his own ride, that's for sure.
So they cut to the Snark shows up like at the support vessel, which again I don't know like where they were before.
I thought it would be California.
Yeah, maybe. I can't.
Because of the side of the ocean the water was coming in on. It was, you know, the way it was shot. It's like, well, it's like coming in from the west. So
yeah.
it looks like, and that there's a lot of Navy stuff out on the West Coast because, of course, that's one of the two oceans
Yeah.
that we use as our national defense. So.
But the Snark shows up at the support vessel in the Atlantic, and they just drop it off on the deck.
Yeah, just pound that thing down. It is
and just sliding around on some caster wheels and stuff, and like nobody. Yeah, it's like, yeah, don't get near that thing until it starts sliding off the deck, and it's all right, get near the thing.
Catch it. It only weighs 20 tons.
Gates is like excitedly setting up the video equipment for the Snark. Him and Mickey are doing this. But then there's
They're
like
having a good time.
Yeah, it's like cool, we get to do our stuff. But then they start having a butting of heads with Bennett and Gates.
Here comes the fun police.
So Stacy and Keach has to put David Carradine in his place.
I'm gonna act like a World War II sea captain. It's like, why are you doing this now?
Yeah, this is again where you just
don't be upset. This is the 70s. We're gonna slide down there on this disco ball and save their ass.
Yeah, it seems like they just need to manufacture some drama here. So.
More drama. There's no reason to be drama. It's like, oh, well, this guy's a little weird, but they're also technical experts in a very obscure area. And the Navy gave him enough money to build his own ship. So apparently they have some confidence in it. Let's let him do his thing. It's like, no, we're going to go by the book. It says nobody ever.
But Gates insists that the Snark can only be run by him and Mickey, but Gates shows off, but then he makes a was it Bloom? Yeah, Bennett makes him use like Lieutenant Bloom here because he's like, he's an expert in everything, so you got to take him with you. And presumably this is all because Bennett thinks Mickey's too fat for the job.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
He does because
he says it later on. But
David Carradine makes a joke. It's like, show him your muscles. So shut up.
So yeah, they put Bloom in there. We cut back to the Neptune where people are just trying to waste time. There's like a list in the ship, so they have like checkered boards that have like some spacing underneath it to make it level. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, this whole set, by the way, is I don't know if it's actually listing or they're just tilting the camera off. I don't know how.
Yeah,
it is omnipresent that this thing is not level.
Yeah,
which kind of gives you a sense of vertigo after watching these characters for a while.
Yeah,
like, this is sort of sickening.
Then we come back to Gates and Bloomer and the Snark, and they make their first dive. Everyone is listening in as Gates narrates his dive, like even the Neptune's listening in. Right here,
shot scene in the movie. No, seriously though, there's more scenes in the movie of the Snark diving than there is of the Gray Lady down. Other scenes. It really, if you add it up, it's like this thing going up and down is the biggest part of the movie.
I mean, it makes a lot of trips for some.
Oh yeah, it does. It does.
That right here, oh yeah, Christopher Reeve shows up. He's Lieutenant Phillips, and like I didn't notice he was here.
Acting role. Yep.
Yeah, and basically 8 months later, he was Superman.
Well, it's quite a jump. Even the caddy didn't have such a big jump.
Yeah, because here I barely recognize him as like, oh yeah, he basically has no lines and he's not focused on. Because I was like, was he not a big thing at the time? It's like, no, this is his first theatrical acting role. He's just a TV guy. So. But yeah, Reeves here is doing like side calculations. He doesn't do much. He's just kind of there. So we need a chinned Navy guy. Here you go.
Yeah, it's a chiseled man.
But yeah, Gates and Bloom are diving, and they're getting like weird radar, because they're like in the chasm or whatever, so they're getting a bunch of like reverberation of the chasm as radar pings, so like they don't know what the hell they're looking at. And then they find a car at the ocean rather than the sub, so this is where it's like everyone gets like no, because the Neptune is like listening in, it's like, no, we didn't find you. So they're back on the first surface, and so Gates insists that they need Mickey on the job, which I really don't know like what he would have done better. It's like, because like Gates is driving the boat, so they just need Mickey's eyes, I guess. I don't know, instincts. So. But here's where Bennett just states out like outright, like, I don't think Mickey's fit enough for the job. And that's where he says like, show him your muscles or something. And it's like, what he does, he just try to like pull, and then he just stops and he goes, I know how to do my job. It's like, and then he takes off his shoes, hands it to a guy, and then he gets in the sub, and he's basically like, see, I fit. Then we cut to the Neptune, and so the radio just suddenly goes out on the sub, so they can't hear anything anymore and can't contact anybody above. Here's where Blanchard kind of like breaks for the first time, and he gets angry and like just kicks Murphy off the bridge because he's like, Murphy's just going through like a bunch of lists of everything that can go wrong because of this, and he's like, yeah, it's like, hey, is it your shift? Why don't you get the hell out of here? And then like I think like Samuelson comes up, is like, you're kind of hard on that guy. so it seems like Samuelson has also calmed down somewhat. I guess Samuelson's calming down once the captain gets angry, because they just have to have those opposite roles. But like, we can't have the same attitude at the same time. That doesn't work here. So we come back to Gates and Mickey. They're taking the Snark for another dive. We cut back to the Neptune. The chief is trying to fix the radio. Which, yeah, I don't think it's funny. I don't think they ever fix anything on this boat, do they?
No, they try. It's just the set's tilting around too much to get a screwdriver on anything.
One of the bolts on the hatch is starting to leak, like, pretty significantly. So that's another, like, just ticking time clock of when this door is going to go. Gates and Mickey find the sub, so it's like, see, they just should have done this the first time. They see a big gash in the back of the sub. They land the model on the sub, so it's very clear. Yeah, again, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they could have done, but yeah, it just the model work just like, it's like two separate movies cut together. It's like, we're watching Thundercats and this Navy rescue movie, and they're just intercut together. So Gates starts banging some Morse code, because after they see that gash and they like lost radio contact, they're like, is anybody alive in there still? So yeah, he lands on top of the Neptune and starts banging out some Morse code. Harris here like kind of redeems himself, because he's now like by the hatch and he's decrypting the Morse code. The Snark has like a blower on it or whatever, and it just kind of like blows away the debris. Like, I don't think it ever actually like grabs a rock and throws it off. It just uses this blower.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting more of the like the hand doing something, but then it just becomes like a blower.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that works too, I guess.
Then we cut back to the door on the command deck is leaking way more now. That's like coming out of like multiple bolts. The Snark's clearing away some more like debris when another gravity slide happens. Here Gates calls it an Earth slide, which I'm not sure if that's a distinction or if like just got through on the script or whatever. It's like, that's fine.
That's what I was thinking. But okay at this point.
They're like overexerting the Snark's power, like, or at least they say that. You never see it like be a problem. The Neptune rolls like 90 degrees. I think they say it's 70, but it's like the set is just completely a 90-degree turn, because you have Heston like walking on a ladder, like standing on top of a ladder that's like 90 degrees. But and so at that angle, the DSRV can't hook up to the sub. So like well, now they're all dead again. But the Snark goes and touches the ship and like bangs out some Morse code to make sure everyone's still alive, and so they are. Captain Blanchard's trying to see if they can do anything on their boat to like roll it over. And here's Heston's like, yeah, I'm trying to remember something from like high school physics. It's like, aren't you a fucking nuclear sub captain? Yeah. Maybe use something from college physics. I don't know. Anyways, I think like one of the problems, like, well, we're running out of air, but they're like, if we blow one of the reserve air tanks, we might be able to roll the sub. It's like, oh, that's a big gamble. And so yeah, Gates make contact with Morse code again. Here he relays back to Bennett like their situation, like a couple more guys have died, but they've just succumbed to previous injuries. They got the air situation going on. And then they talked about like how they're going to try to roll the boat. They call him back to the surface, but Gates insists on like staying with the Neptune. And in the Neptune, they like abandon the bridge, but there's also these like levers that they can only access here to blow the ballast tanks in the bridge. They can't access them anywhere else.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that creates the okay. I didn't know why they were doing that. I must have missed that, but now you explain. It's like, okay, yeah, this is why they have the suicide lever.
So Murphy stays behind in the room as it starts to flood because like the thing opens up, which it with the amount of pressure behind that door, it should probably flood faster than they did. They should not be able to have this time to save it. But I actually don't know, but I'm good. Yeah. So Murphy stays behind to pull these levers to open the ballast tanks because they're not going to have another time of it. And then Samuelson also stays behind, but he just kind of is there to close the door. And then I wrote, they're most likely dead. But the ship...
Yeah, it would be weird if they popped up later. Like, we made it.
And then the boat starts to roll over, but it doesn't roll over enough because it's like stuck on some rock. And then Blanchard like looks back into the hatch, like peephole or whatever, or I guess porthole. And then I wrote a dead or panicked Samuelson because he doesn't seem exactly dead here, but he knows he's going to die at least. I'm not sure because he's kind of like floating, but then you can clearly see like bubbles coming out of his mouth and stuff. So I don't know. I think it's meant to be dead and just weird. So then he Blanchard retreats to his captain's quarters and has a quiet breakdown.
Yeah, which you probably would. It was like, fuck, we just made up. Just got over our disagreement. And now I had to watch him die.
Now I'll never be a captain. So I have that being the Act 2 because that's they're at the lowest. You got Act 3. We cut back to the surface ship. We got Gates and Bennett are sulking over like lost opportunities till Bennett has the idea like, let's have the Snark set a shape charge to get the sub into place. And then they just airdrop some air explosives in. I don't know if these are going to just be explosive experts. Or are these supposed to be the Navy SEALs or what's that? Buds, basic underwater demolition crew guys or whatever. The thing you take before you actually go to be a Navy SEAL training.
Oh, yeah. The demolition guys. Yeah, I don't know. When were the Navy SEAls a thing?
I thought
that came out of Vietnam.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's look here. What Navy SEALs started 1962. So yeah, they would have been. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know when they like became a big like a synonymous thing in movies where it's like, oh yeah, we need special forces. Like, what do you need? It's like, well, let's get the guys with all the gear. That's the Navy SEALs because they have everything. There's like $1 million behind every one of these guys.
Oh yeah,
there's all James Bonds.
Because I remember for a long time it was just special forces.
Yeah,
which always meant like Delta Force. It was always like, and in the books I read about like the Vietnam War, it's like that's when like Delta Force was like a huge, because they had weird names like, you know, special or observation group or something. You know, they had innocuous sounding names, and it's like, oh yeah, that's Delta Force. And then you find out, no, there's Navy SEALs doing that too. It's like, what? Who are they? And it's like, oh, you mean the guys that put bombs on like submarines, like those guys. Then you find out, it's like, no, they do everything. They just have a much larger budget to do it. So, oh, cool. And they took sections out of some of our ballistic missile submarines and just put like diving things in so they could release Navy SEALs, sabotage infrastructure in whatever country we didn't like. It's like, oh, that's, you guys get your own submarine. Go be released into the sea.
Yeah, if you want the furthest imagination of what a Navy SEAL can do, you can read the Joe Buff books where they basically solve all problems with nuclear weapons and secrecy and.
Yeah, Joe Buff, like Navy SEALs, which by the way I love those books, but It's like, yeah, Navy SEALs become astronauts in that book. They're capable of almost anything. It's like, and I hope they are. And then they have the German. They introduced like, oh, what if the Germans had Navy SEAls? It's like they would all be psychopaths. It's like, oh, yeah, probably, but okay. What were they called? The Kampfschwimmer
Yeah,
or something?
Kampfschwimmer, yeah.
Yeah, it's like they were just, and they always killed people with knives because they were just extra evil.
So Gates is going to ride with one of the explosive experts who like will control the arm. So here he doesn't have a problem with it. You need Mickey until the explosives are involved.
Oh, it's the same guy that displaced.
What? No, it isn't. This is a different guy. This is explosive.
Oh, I thought it was the same guy that went down with him the first time. Oh, okay.
Like I thought that was point 2 because they never say his name. Is like, oh, is this that the not Poole, but whatever. But no, this guy's name is Waters.
Okay.
This is Lieutenant Waters.
Well, see there, I learned something else. Like, same hairstyle. I don't think.
Well, also have his buddy who seems to be like Mexican and then never talks except to say like, no, that's not my job to push the plunger. So I'm wondering if that was like a real guy in the Navy. That guy.
Probably. Like, hey, we don't have to pay him a day rate, dude. No, he's in the Navy. Cool, get him on there.
So yeah, they start their dive in the Snark. The lights start to go out in the Neptune, and so they pull out a bunch of like battery lanterns and stuff like that. They're getting sleepy. Oh, I forgot to mention there's like, yeah, one of the like lieutenants in this. It's like Lieutenant Fletcher or something like that. He's in Full Metal Jacket.
Oh yeah, what's that guy's name? Damn it. What's his name here?
I thought it was something that starts with an F. Dorian Harewood, or is it Harwood? Fowler. He plays Lieutenant Fowler.
Oh, okay.
He's like the guys. Yeah, it's not too buku. The black lieutenant in this movie.
Oh yeah, when they're talking with yeah, okay. The guy who okay, yeah, him.
But yeah, here he's getting sleepy, which I don't know if it's just like, oh yeah, you're tired because you've been up for all the time, or I think this is supposed to be like, oh, the CO2 is getting to them, but I don't know.
Yeah. Stress is getting to them.
So yeah, they I think again they tap on they give Morse code here. They tell Blanchard that like they're gonna blow the rock that's on top of them, and so he readies the men for like the shockwave and flooding that may start. I don't see anybody handing out earplugs. Like everything on here has to be awful to hear, but
Yeah. Well, I didn't do that back then.
The explosive guy's Waters is setting the bomb with a mechanical arm. There's a lot of like, pomp and circumstance to like, oh, you got to get this right, like, and then they just get it right and nothing happens. So they pull the Snark back into place. They actually pull it back on the boat, and then Gates just takes it back down to watch it explode, which seems like a terrible idea.
Yeah. Water like compresses. The water will carry the explosion a lot further than if it was in a free air. It's more destructive, especially when you're in a pressurized submersible.
Yeah. Because I thought
I gotta see this. This is gonna be cool. Okay.
Well, they said like after they blow it up, they're gonna send in the DSRV 1 minute later. Where I thought it was like, okay, yeah, we just need to keep everything out of the place when it blows up. But then they just shove this thing down here. It's like, it doesn't matter.
Well, again, the star of the movie is the Snark and it's diving. Literally, yeah. I'm not kidding. The more times on that than any other one thing in this movie.
Well, I mean, also they gotta pull the Snark back on the ship because Waters gets out, and then like Gates stays in the Snark and doesn't let Mickey back in. He's like, nah, just me. It's like, so it's like, okay, yeah, this is another suicide mission here. So
what if he's like, you're too fat, you suck up too much of the oxygen. Those big muscles, they require lots of oxygen. It's just me.
Yeah, so he's basically just going back down to confirm how things will go after the explosion happens.
And maybe he wants to be alone to, do something.
Gates gets the snark in view, and then they like count down to blow the charge. Here, this is at Christopher Reeve that does the countdown here. Um, so it blows. The crew quarters flood, but they're not there, so that's fine. The sub starts to move, and it sits up straighter. But then they say that it nearly goes over the cliff, but then it doesn't. Because some of the dialogue they say here compared to like the special effects works, just like it doesn't seem to match up sometimes. But that's fine.
Yeah, this is one of those movies with just not so special stuff. And especially when they're doing a running dialogue of like, "Oh, what's happening?" and they try to explain it, and that's not what's happening. It's like, this is weird. It's totally meta at this point.
I don't know. Do you want to comment?
The secret message is nobody knows what's happening.
I don't know. Do you want to comment on the model work here, Nathan? Do you think they did the best job they could, or do you think they cheaped out on stuff?
I mean, I build models as a hobby. I don't know how, constrained by what almost seems like a TV budget.
Yeah.
They probably did as good, the best they could with what they had.
Yeah.
It seems like I said, this is one of those weird movies from the 70s where it's like it's timeless in the fact that it could have been made at any point in the last previous 30 years and you wouldn't know. So I mean, I don't think things look great, but I think they probably had cameras submerged in water and weird lighting, and they were trying not to electrocute people. So I think they did the best they could.
Okay.
It's better now with CG or CG laid over practical, which just seems to get you the best result of stuff like this.
Yeah.
Because no one's ever really, the closest I've ever seen to what I imagine a submarine would be in real life is probably something between like Das Boot and, well, Das Boot comes the closest. Not because the special effects are great, but because you appreciate the fact it's a giant industrial machine under the water.
Yeah.
Now, those were diesel-powered boats, so they're even more relatable because atomic power is kind of amorphous to most people. But everyone's fixed an engine in a car, or at least knows what they are. So you can imagine it's like, oh, I'm under the water with this now. And, things break and they go wrong. And but this movie is more of a rescue melodrama than it is a submarine movie. It's just like the submarine is just the setting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they did the best they could for what they had to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it'd be, I don't know, it'd probably be worse if they found a way to just not even include the special effects.
Yeah,
just say things are happening and then
just talk about stuff. It's the most dissociated submarine movie you've ever seen. Submarine movie without submarines. It's like Garfield without Garfield. Everyone's just screaming into the void.
We cut to the DSRV is finally launched into the sea. Then we come back to the Neptune. They start to position the wounded to be put on board at first. The DSRV attaches to the escape hatch. They open it up. They first hand some oxygen down because they're going to make 2 trips. So they got to, I'm guessing, have some oxygen for the guys they leave there, I guess. I don't know. It was like a weird point that like they don't follow up on, explain, or even like use.
Yeah, I want to know about that because they spent like 3 minutes of guys hucking tanks from together. It's like, okay, what does this mean? I thought there was gonna be some drama later as a result of like, no, take my mask and watch me suffocate. I figured, oh, we're gonna have one of those scenes. It never happened.
Let's see here. Oh, Gates watches like some of the soil starts to slide. The DSRV lifts off with its first group of passengers. They make it back on the boat, and there's like all excitement when they get off. I think there's clapping here. And then the DSRV goes back in to make one last trip. The sub starts to slide down the ledge again. Gates, oh yeah, the DSRV, it attaches again, so they're getting people in. The sub starts to slide. Gates moves the Snark in closer to the sub, and then he just pins the Snark under the Neptune to keep it from sliding, which he's basically killed here. Which I thought every moment there was going to be like, oh, he's alive, but no, it never happens. No.
I thought we were going to have a scene like from The Abyss where you see his hand on the glass and the thing just implodes. That doesn't happen, but, It's...
And then so the DSRV gets away, and then the Snark and the sub like fall off the ledge into the abyssal plane or whatever thing or whatever. And then we have Mickey mourns for Gates back in the radio, his little room with the camera on it.
Which was actually kind of a poignant scene. It's why Ned Beatty's a good actor.
Yeah.
Because he just kind of like, he does this. He's like, he's not going to show emotions. He very gently and deliberately sets the mic down. Like, I'm never going to talk to him again. And then and the one guy's just sitting there drinking his coffee, like staring into space. You know, it's like, oh, but nobody acknowledge anyone. If we start crying, we're going to beat shit out of each other. So nobody acknowledge anyone. So I thought that was like sort of a cool scene.
Yeah.
Of like, yeah, this guy just died to save all these people, and we're going to acknowledge that kind of, you know, like men do by we don't have feelings.
Then we come back to the DSRVs getting on the board. Captain Blanchard comes aboard. There's like a bell ringing announcement that like the Neptune is arriving or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And then Bennett welcomes.
I don't know if they actually do that, but it sounds cool.
Yeah, there's some of those pop and circumstance I've heard of before, and I don't know it. It's like I never had to do it, and I never had to do it, and so I just don't remember it at all. But yeah, there's all this pop and circumstance that goes on in the Navy with stuff like that, where certain people coming on board and stuff like that. Because it's sometimes it's there. It's like, is this just there for theatrics? But also it's like trying to corral these people to do stuff. Like when you have this ceremony going on, it reminds people, oh, that's what we're doing. So that's why you have that stuff, and because it like signifies like different portions of the trip or whatever and things like that. So.
Well, and it's also the closest thing we have to like our British forebearers.
Yeah,
it's like, because we just totally based our Navy. It's like, what's the winning team? The British. It's like, okay, that's what our Navy is going to be. And then so far, 300 years later, never been defeated. It's like, well, this seems to be working. But yeah, there's so much stuff with naval stuff where it's all just purely tradition.
Yeah.
And we're still essentially doing the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like, that's where Star Trek gets kind of funny. It's like, oh, they're still doing the same stuff, but they're in space. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And also, they're not really the military anymore. They're kind of the military when the Borg attack, but the rest of the time they're just explorers with military ranks. But yeah, when they do it like here, it's like, nope, there's still guys floating around in the sea. It's just they're using nuclear reactors instead of sails. But yeah, it's never changed. The uniforms aren't as cool as they used to be. Like those three-cornered hats and stuff, like like those. I don't know. I know they got rid of that because it was inefficient, but it also is like, those are kind of cool in a way. But it's a big wool uniforms are not comfortable for me.
Blanchard like walks to the edge of the deck, drinks coffee, and then just like looks out somberly onto the ocean. Even though this is like directly after like Gates dying, it's like Blanchard doesn't know Gates, so he doesn't know what to be sad for that. He's just sad about the 52 men he lost on the ship. So
yeah,
that they're probably never going to get ever again. Like those bodies are gone.
Well, unless they send the Glomar Explorer down.
Then we get a title call that says the United States DSRV is today a reality. It is capable of rescuing men from U.S. submarines in any of the world's oceans, if it's not too deep. Yeah. They don't put that. I put that in there.
And we're also willing to rescue Russians if they trust we're not going to steal the secrets to their antique submarines.
But yeah, that's the end of Gray Lady Down. Kind of a bold ending for a movie where it's like just have everybody be sad at the end.
Well, again, yeah, this was the least melodramatic of the disaster movies of the 70s.
Yeah,
probably because like it involved the military, and so they had to be a little more somber about it. Because the Navy's not going to give you all that free production value if you portray their officers as being emotionally out of control.
Yeah, but they also didn't like have them like, oh, and everything worked out in the end. They didn't have that.
No. When a submarine goes down in the ocean, it never works out well. It's a horrible way to die. And especially submarines, they're like the worst. It's like everything will kill you all at once.
But yeah, this is also a big departure from the book, because in the book, I forget what happens because I didn't actually read that middle passage. So I didn't get it in my quick skimming of it. But the DSRV, they can't get it down there. The diving bell doesn't work because they had to like modify it, and then ends up like breaking in a way they can't use it again. and so they have to get like a Russian. They have a diving bell, so they end up getting rescued by Russians at the end of the book.
And we trusted the Russians with our submarine.
Yeah, well, no, they didn't. That's why they waited for so long. But like
Oh,
that's also why it takes a month to get them out of there. So
that's like Tom Clancy said about one of the interviews he did about like would we have actually tried to commit espionage and about with the Russian submarine, the Kursk, and he's like, no, because we don't want to build the things they do, and they can't build the things we do. We know what they're doing, and it's not anything it's like, yeah, let's do that. Obviously, there's submarines down on the bottom of the ocean. It's probably not, indication that anything good was going on. Because for a long time, remember they said that we hit it.
yeah.
Like that's why it sunk, because American submarine, because that has happened before. We crashed into each other, but. And then there's one. Remember the one that they crashed? One of them got like crashed into a rock underwater, like an underwater mountain.
Yeah.
And it ripped the front of it off, and they just brought it back to its home port somehow.
Yeah.
Like, oh wow, that's crazy. It's just turn it around, bring it home. And then one of them got damaged very badly in the tsunami.
Huh.
Like, they didn't talk about that a whole lot, but whatever, like the upper part of it was, the sail, I guess, from the water hitting it and kind of whiplashing it, it like broke a bunch of it was like unstable. It was like broke a bunch of welds. They're just like, well, let's get home with it. It's like they don't like abandon ship or anything. Like, let's get home with it. And I guess one of them's back. I think maybe both of them are working again. I'm not sure. Those things cost so much damn money.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. So how much to buy a new one? How much to repair this? It's like almost the same money.
Well, they had pictures of the one in a dry dock that hit the rock. It was like, oh, did they pull this from the bottom of the ocean? Like there was just chunks missing and a whole section ripped off. It's like this thing made it back under its own power. Like,
I mean, I guess if the bulkhead doors are closed, yeah,
those sweaty doors, like
yeah.
it's wet. The hell are we doing here? I'd just put a chair in front of that door. It's like, if you do something else, it's like, I'm sitting with a flashlight, waiting for that bolt to shoot out at Mach 10.
Yeah, interesting movie. It never existed. Basically, kind of seems like a TV episode of Star Trek, and if it wasn't so long, it would have been a fine episode of a TV show. But as a movie, it's a bit too long, and some of the effects don't live up to the drama of the event, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm sure Tom Clancy read the Event 1000 book and thought I could do better, and did.
Yeah, he proved it right.
Because there's a lot of technical stuff in the book, but it's just not as interestingly written. And even though Tom Clancy stuff, even when it gets really technical and diatribe-y, like even that stuff, it's like it's not cleverly written. It's just like, here's all my research, but it's like, that's cool research, I guess.
Well, the way the story's structured, you like, I gotta know this.
Yeah.
This is gonna pay off at some point. Like in the Sum of All Fears, when like the helicopter is hovering outside the bad guy's apartment, it's like, why does his TV keep changing? It's like, because he keeps messing with his remote control, because the targeting thing for the Hellfire missile is the same frequency as the TV remote's changing. Like, I don't even know if that's true. But I remember like they explained at some point, like, it's like, oh yeah, it uses the same like RF infrared thing that your TV remote uses, just at a much more powerful. It's like, well, who needs to know that? And then, but when the guy's sitting there and you don't know what's going on, but it's like, I can't get my TV channel to stay. It's like, oh, he's being targeted with a missile from like a Apache or something. Oh, okay.
Huh.
I think it was Sum of All Fears. I don't know. One of those books.
I read somewhere that someone said like this is like Charlton Heston's like last leading man role, or at least for like studio film. And I was like looking at stuff, and it's kind of is, because it's like after in the 80s he was just kind of in TV, and in the 90s he basically just did voice over work. He just did a lot of narrator stuff.
Yeah. He was also president of the NRA in the 90s too. So he had other things on his mind.
Yeah.
Which, hey, I'm not going to say it was necessarily a bad thing.
Um. Yeah. 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 Sending a probe into space, containing a supercut of scenes from the Imperfect Collection. That is the Verhoeven Effect. Nathan, what scene from this movie are we
Oh,
showing?
we're just sending pictures. We're just sending the different interstitial scenes of that gore and the importance of it. It was the only plot device in this movie that really built tension for me.
Yeah.
It was very cool. If they'd had a few more things like that, this was
Yeah.
almost a good movie.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they just it's like. But yeah, that did kind of pay off because it's like that is the thing keeping you alive. Is that just that piece of steel
Yeah.
and the rubber gasket that's like holding it in place.
You also find us at Letterboxd, username VHE. So 1 out of 5 stars. What are we giving this movie?
I'm going to give this a 2 stars for effort. There's things I liked here, but overall, this was kind of like this movie did not engage me like some of the stuff we see.
Yeah, and looking at the box office, yeah, there's almost like no information about this movie. The box office said it made $5 million at the box office, so I'm guessing it was a big loss for them, or maybe it equaled out. I have no idea.
I'm getting weird figures on the budget, anywhere from $2.5 to $4 million production budget for this movie.
Okay.
But I don't. But they're also like I'm getting all kinds of different numbers because it's like going back to the like original paperwork where they got the loans to make the movie stuff, and I don't know how much of this is gobbledygook and how much of it is.
Well, I saw that because Superman came out this same year, and the budget for that was apparently $50 million. I'm like, okay. Which I feel like so much of these 70s movies, the budgets are like anywhere from like 2 to 15 million. So that seems like, oh, that's a jump. But it was also a huge movie, so.
Well, also they filmed 2 movies with Superman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, because Superman 1 and 2 were filmed simultaneously, and they were supposed to be a big, like a part 1, part 2 release in the same year. But then they're like, no, we're just splitting it to 1 and 2. So that's why, yeah. So that number makes more sense because it's about $20 million a movie.
Yeah.
So, which I didn't learn till years later. Like I didn't know that until like 4 years ago or whatever.
There's like some crazy trivia behind it because the people that own like the rights to Superman are like crazy, like near like criminal people.
Nice. Well, yeah, because that's like 100-year franchise at this point, right?
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be in that old. So yeah.
Oh, if you like what you heard, how could you can find us at verhoeveneffect.com. There we have listener support. You can support us a monthly stipend on either 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99. You can rate our podcast whatever you want, but remember the algorithm only listens to the highest rating. Remember, you control the algorithm doesn't control you. You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect. You can find us at Blue Sky Social at Verhoeven Effect.
Okay.
That's
tell me what this is.
That's kind of like the Twitter replacement.
Okay.
I put in a request for an account like 4 months ago, so it's limited, but it's like I remember people are trying to jump off Twitter, and that seemed like the best working one of those, but I don't think it has the traction, but it doesn't matter to us because we don't get traction anywhere. So
yeah.
You can find us at Facebook at Verhoeven Effect, and you can find us on YouTube at American Grief Factory. You can watch both this and that show live and unedited. And we also have, oh, no, we don't. All right, I guess we do have t-shirts at BowlTheCollar.com/Greed Factory for, I don't know, 48 more hours.
Yeah, get on that. Get on their ass and get us like 20 shirts.
I mean, if you're watching this live, you can get a t-shirt. By the time this is released, you can't. So
yeah.
on the audio feed. So
yeah, this is for the people that sit down with us live and go into the long haul.
Well, so for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Conlon.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.